Abnormia.
Welcome to Murder You, an Abnormia original, a true crime series exploring the most shocking murders worldwide. I'm your host, Maddie. Welcome to today's newest episode, Mass Murder at Northern Illinois. Before we begin, please like and subscribe to our channel for all the latest Murder You content. Let's get started. Today I'll discuss the 2008 mass shooting at Northern Illinois University in DeKalb, Illinois. This tragic event claimed the lives of 5 students, with 21 others wounded or injured in the attack. Steven Kazmierczak was a graduate student at the University of Illinois. However, it was his alma mater, NIU, that became the target of his deranged plan to carry out an infamous massacre. We've discussed several school shootings on this podcast, and the NIU mass murder shares striking similarities with other cases. The killer was a mentally disturbed young white male who was bullied during adolescence. He developed a fascination for school shootings and admired the killers who perpetrated them. Like the Virginia Tech massacre 14 months prior, it was a well-planned attack. The killer likely drew inspiration from that horrendous massacre. As we cover these tragic incidents, we want to honor the lives of the victims and avoid glorifying these killers. When I address the psychological issues of these murderers, it's never to excuse their actions, but rather to understand why these events keep occurring. So, let's examine this case. Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2008, was supposed to be a day of love at Northern Illinois University. Instead, those who survived it would remember it as the day a hateful and senseless mass murder occurred. It was a frigid Thursday, and snow covered the campus grounds. A Geology 104, Introduction to Ocean Sciences class was underway in Cole Hall Auditorium 101. It was one of 2 auditoriums in Cole Hall, and it seated 464 students. 165 students were registered for the class, and 120 were present that day. Sometime after 3 p.m., Steven Kazmierczak entered a side vestibule leading to Auditorium 101 in Cole Hall. An unlocked metal door concealed the hidden room that few were aware of. Kazmierczak carried a black acoustic guitar case containing a sawed-off Remington 12-gauge shotgun. He also brought a black backpack, 3 loaded handguns, 8 loaded magazines, a partially consumed bottle of Gatorade, and 3 periodicals. He wore dark brown boots, jeans, a black knit hat, and a black t-shirt with the word terrorist imposed over an image of an assault rifle. He had thought about this moment for some time. The depression and anxiety he felt for years had gotten worse, and he was determined to end his life. But he wanted to make others pay for the years of bullying and mistreatment he experienced. Those who knew Steven described him as a sweet, unassuming young man who finally snapped. However, that narrative ignores the thought and preparation he put into carrying out this massacre. Something in Kazmierczak's life went horribly wrong, and it led him down an evil path that would end in murder. It started, as it usually does, during his turbulent childhood. Steven Kazmierczak was born on August 26, 1980, to Robert and Gail Kazmierczak of Elk Grove Village in Hoffman Estates, Illinois. His father worked for the United States Postal Service, and his mother worked as a secretary. According to Esquire magazine, Kazmierczak grew up watching horror movies with his mother. They had an odd relationship, and some in the family described Gail as not mentally right. She rarely let her shy son play with other children or go outside. The shades of the house were usually drawn. His mother couldn't sleep at night because of insomnia and depression, so they would watch scary movies all day and night. Interestingly, his mother was also a firm believer in the Bible, so she drilled the lessons of the good book into her son. Kazmierczak attended Sauk Creek Elementary School and Elk Grove Village Junior High. During these years, teachers described him as motivationally inconsistent and disruptive. At least one teacher reported that he sometimes behaved inappropriately. They further described him as having a negative attitude and acting careless and impulsive. According to one instructor, Kazmierczak's early writings focused on themes of violence. Like many mass shooters, Steven was relentlessly bullied, and he, in turn, picked on others who seemed like easy targets. A friend named Adam described an incident in which Kazmierczak picked up his pug, which had breathing problems, and slammed it against a wall. He and the same friend shot passing cars with a pellet gun for fun. They also made Drano bombs, which they would explode on neighbors' doorsteps. That is until they were caught and hauled into the police station for questioning. Kazmierczak eventually gave up the names of all his friends who could make Drano bombs, and he lost the few friends he had just as he was about to enter high school. In 1994, Kazmierczak enrolled in Elk Grove High School. High school was even more brutal in terms of being picked on. During the 9th and 10th grades, he had few close friends. He hung out with the goth kids who dressed in black, wearing long trench coats and black leather boots. He would often chain smoke with other goths in the parking lot, but he was an outsider even among this group. By his junior year, Kazmierczak had grown cold and distant to everyone who knew him. In December of 1996, Kazmierczak tried to kill himself by overdosing on Tylenol. He stayed at a medical facility for a brief period, but nothing helped his anxiety and depression. They put him on various medications, and the normally rail-thin teen blew up to 300 pounds. He wandered the halls of high school, overweight, in a zombie-like state, but he didn't care about the bullying as much once he was zoned out on meds. In one incident, a group of jocks ridiculed him and called him Suicide Steve. Kids are just so cruel. That kind of bullying can cause lasting psychological damage. That April, Kazmierczak again tried to kill himself by slitting his wrists and taking 40 Ambien. He was in and out of the hospitals and psychiatric facilities over the next year, with several more suicide attempts. Despite all of this, Kazmierczak managed to do his schoolwork. He graduated from high school in June 1998. After graduation, he lived in a group home because his parents were afraid of him. He got a series of jobs at Walgreens, Osco Pharmacy, and Kmart, but was fired from all of them. His anxiety and depression became worse, and he began wetting the bed at night. Doctors changed his medication, which helped. However, there was no cure for his other psychological conditions. Kazmierczak wanted to get off the meds, so he began weaning himself off. When the program he was in found out, they discharged him for failing to work with the doctors. In September 2001, just 6 days before the 9/11 attack, Steve Kazmierczak enlisted in the Army. According to Esquire, he checked no suicide attempts on his Army application. No for being evaluated or treated for a mental condition, no for using illegal drugs, no for depression or excessive worry, and no for receiving counseling of any type. Incredibly, the Army gave him a $4,000 bonus, and he shipped off to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, for basic training. Kazmierczak loved the Army. Its structure and order aligned with his OCD, and his insomnia disappeared. Kazmierczak had finally found a home in the military. He ran every day and earned praise for his organizational skills and attention to detail. He learned to shoot and kill without emotion, which made him proud. In December, he received orders to join the 6th Air Defense Artillery Brigade at Fort Bliss, Texas. However, soon after getting orders for his permanent duty station, the fraudulent answers on his Army application caught up to him. The Army learned Kazmierczak was hospitalized for psychotic episodes and suicide attempts. He was ordered to undergo a psych exam. 3 days later, he was transferred to William Beaumont Army Medical Center Psych Ward as a precaution against any suicide attempts. The following day, the Army informed him that they knew he lied about his mental health history, his suicide attempts, and several psychotic episodes. He was discharged on the grounds of a fraudulent enlistment. Kazmierczak was devastated. He finally found an environment where he thrived, only to have it snatched away. However, he had been off his medications for a year, and his mental health had greatly improved. 6 months after being booted from the Army, he moved back home to attend college at Northern Illinois University. His life seemed to be improving. That is, except for his social awkwardness. His college roommate, Adam, called him Strange Steve behind his back and told everyone in their orbit that Kazmierczak was a psycho. At lunch, Kazmierczak usually got a meal in the cafeteria and ate alone in his room. He wore long sleeves to hide his homemade tattoos, regardless of how warm it is. He talked excitedly about Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and Hitler as if he admired them. His roommates were creeped out by this, as you can imagine. So, in the fall of 2003, he moved out and got his own room. He studied every waking hour. He took an Introduction to Sociology course in Cole Hall 100 and often had stimulating office hours discussions with Professor Jim Thomas about American society. He befriended a guy named Kevin, and they had in-depth discussions about Columbine. They talk about the method of murder, the weapons used, and what the killers could have done differently. That's a big red flag, but no one imagines their friend could be the next Columbine shooter. Kazmierczak decided to major in sociology and criminology. He met a girl named Diana, who became his girlfriend, so his social life improved. He tutored other students in statistics and was described as an excellent and empathetic tutor. After he broke up with Diana, he met Jessica, who became his new girlfriend. In May 2006, he received the prestigious Dean's Award, one of the highest honors for an undergraduate. He then graduated from NIU and went on to graduate school. Kazmierczak was on top of the world. Then, everything began to unravel. His mother died in September 2006. Then, NIU cut half the faculty from its sociology department because there were fewer advanced courses in criminology. Steve must change schools and attend grad school at the University of Illinois, 3 hours south in Champaign. He was very upset about moving to a new place and having to meet new friends. After a messy breakup with his girlfriend, Kazmierczak failed the LSAT, making him ineligible for law school. He felt like a failure and began questioning whether he had chosen the right career path. Kazmierczak started buying guns and became obsessed with them. He hadn't been in the mental health care system for 5 years, so he was eligible for a gun permit in Illinois. He bought at least 4 guns and regularly went to the firing range. He stopped going to classes and failed a few courses. On April 16, 2007, Seung Hoi Cho killed 32 students at Virginia Tech. This event had a profound impact on Kazmierczak. He talked a lot about it with his friends, who assumed he was interested in the mass murder from a graduate studies POV. However, he genuinely admired the killer and began studying his writings and methods for carrying out mass murder. Stephen and Jessica moved to Champaign in June, even though they were no longer a couple. During this period, Kazmierczak's mental health began to decline. His insomnia and paranoia returned. He met with a social worker at the McKinley Health Center on the University of Illinois campus, but failed to inform them of his past mental health history. The doctor who saw him noted that Steve shows elements of both social anxiety and obsessive-compulsive disorder. He was prescribed Prozac and sent on his way. The prescription didn't alleviate his anxiety about being in a new place. He did better in his classes, but still felt judged by everyone. It took him years to cultivate an environment he felt comfortable in, and now all that was gone. Kazmierczak took a job as a corrections officer at the Rockville Correctional Facility in Indiana, but the position wasn't what he had hoped for. He went off his Prozac, and friends noticed he was short-tempered and not his usual self. He began having casual sexual encounters with both men and women on Craigslist. He got a tattoo of Jigsaw, the character from the Saw movies, on his right forearm. He bought more guns and ammunition and began preparing for the attack. Kazmierczak booked a hotel room in DeKalb. When he arrived in DeKalb, he checked into the Best Western, changed his mind, and checked into the Travelodge. He sent some final messages and talked to a few friends for the last time. He called Jessica to wish her a happy Valentine's Day and said goodbye. He closed his email accounts and deleted the messages. He removed the SIM card from his phone and the hard drive from his laptop and disposed of them so they wouldn't be found. Kazmierczak spent 3 days in the Travelodge, and now the day was finally here. He loaded the guitar case with the shotgun and other supplies. He stuck the pistols in the holsters beneath his trench coat. He got into his car and drove a short distance to the NIU campus. He parked near Cole Hall and exited the vehicle. He listened to Marilyn Manson music to pump himself up. It was Valentine's Day, and Steven Kazmierczak was about to commit a heartless massacre. At 3:06 p.m., students in Geology 104, Introduction to Ocean Sciences, were listening to a lecture in one of the two Cole Hall auditoriums. 165 students were registered for the class, and 120 attended class that day. The events would be burned into the survivors' memory as long as they lived. Kazmierczak kicked open the concealed door and walked onto the lecture stage. He stared at the class momentarily before raising his sawed-off shotgun and firing into the front row. As the professor tried to escape, he turned and fired at the man. He fired more rounds at the lecturer as the man scrambled to reach a side door that was locked. The professor was shot but managed to survive. The killer turned his attention to the students and fired point blank down the aisle, hitting several of them. With the barrel sawed off, the shotgun pellets sprayed in a broad pattern, hitting many people each time, just as the killer intended. Survivors described the shooter as having a blank expression. At one point, the gunman calmly stopped to reload a weapon. Someone yelled, "He's reloading!" giving some a chance to escape towards the main entrance. Once the shotgun was out of ammo, the killer tossed it aside, pulled out a 9mm Glock pistol, and continued firing. He fired indiscriminately up and down the aisles, hitting fleeing and cowering students. Some ran to the front entrance to escape, others hid between seats, and a few, frozen with fear, failed to comprehend what was happening until it was too late. Senior Patrick Corellis was one of the 120 students in class that day. He spoke to NBC5 Chicago about the moment the firing began. "In my head, I'm like, is this some kind of joke? What is going on?" Corellis said. "After 3-4 shots, I realized, wow, this is an actual school shooting. I got under my desk and hid there." When the killer reloaded, Corellis bolted for the exit. "I felt something hit me in the back of my head and I was bleeding. So, I was holding my head and he shot again and again," Corellis recalled 15 years later. Brian Karpus was a teaching assistant. He dove behind the speaking podium once the shooting began. Now there was nowhere to run. He peered around the podium to get a look at the killer who spotted him. Kazmierczak fired the Glock at Brian, shooting him multiple times, including once in the head. As he moved on to others, Brian pretended to be dead. Luckily, he would survive. Dan Parmenter visited the class on Valentine's Day to be with his girlfriend Lauren DeBauer. When the shooting began, Dan shielded Lauren with his body. The killer shot him 5 times and he died. The killer then shot Lauren and the girl next to her. Student Gina Jaquez was lying on the floor in the 4th row with her friends Catalina and Maria as the killer walked up and down the aisles, shooting people. She recalled staring at the shooter's shoes from under the seats. Kazmierczak fired a total of 6 rounds from the shotgun and nearly 50 rounds from the Glock pistol. Less than a minute after the first 911 call, NIU police arrived outside Cole Hall. It seemed like an eternity for the students who survived the ordeal, but only 2 minutes had passed. Suddenly, the shooting stopped. The gunman jumped back on the stage. Moments later, a final shot rang out as Steven Kazmierczak shot and killed himself. The room fell silent, but the roar of the shots was still ringing in their ears. When Gina Jaquez looked around, she saw 23 students were shot and lying motionless on the floor. Some pretended to be dead, and 5 were deceased. When Gina tapped her friend Catalina on the back and told her it was time to go, her friend didn't budge. Then she saw the blood pooling around Catalina. She was one of the unlucky victims killed during the end of a science lecture that should have been the safest place in the world. As the smoke cleared, the survivors saw that 5 students, Catalina Garcia, Daniel Parmenter, Gail Dubowski, Juliana Gahant, and Ryan Mace, were dead. When officers reached the classroom, they found over half a dozen shocked students still sitting in their seats, according to a report issued by the university after the shooting. In the days following the tragic massacre at NIU, Police went through the belongings Kazmierczak left at the Travelodge Motel in DeKalb. He paid cash for the room 3 days before the shootings and signed in only as Steven on a slip of paper. In his room, they found empty cartons of cigarettes, discarded containers of energy drinks, and cold medicine. The refrigerator was stocked with more energy drinks. They found a duffel bag with the zippers glued shut that the bomb squad had to open. What they didn't see was any indication of why this quiet, unassuming grad student carried out a mass murder at his alma mater. Friends of Steven Kazmierczak spoke to police and described him as a happy, stable, intelligent, and empathetic scholar. Kristen Myers, an associate professor of sociology who knew Kazmierczak, told NBC News that he didn't fit the image of a loner or outcast. Profiling would not have worked with Steve. People would let him into their home, Myers said. People feel so bad that we didn't know he was suffering like this. The authorities uncovered Kazmierczak's history of mental illness and learned he had stopped taking his medication. They discovered his recent interest in firearms, which were all purchased legally in a state with pretty strict gun control laws. Unfortunately, the takeaway from this story is that if someone wants to carry out a mass murder, it's tough to stop them. Even if Kazmierczak had been on law enforcement's radar, there's little they could have done to prevent this killing. He hadn't broken any laws. To most people, he seemed like a stable, mild-mannered graduate student. Perhaps a little shy, but by all outward appearances, a well-adjusted member of society. I'm not even sure that those close to Kazmierczak could have helped him once he went off his medications. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't all be vigilant, proactive, and supportive of our friends who are struggling with mental health issues. Kazmierczak's mental health issues don't absolve him from destroying so many lives. He openly admired other mass murderers and meticulously planned this massacre. While it's sad that he was bullied and had a difficult life, somewhere along the way, he decided to hurt others to achieve infamy. My heart goes out to the friends and families of the victims. That's it for this episode. If you or anyone you know has information about a possible school shooting or a threat to your community, please call the FBI's National Threat Operations Center at 304-625-0990 or contact the FBI by dialing 1-800-CALL-FBI.
Abnormia.